The time is 5:30, and we'll call this meeting of the Newark City Council Finance Committee to order. Members present are Mrs. Floyd, Mr. Marmee, Mr. Bubb, Mr. Cost, and myself. We do have 4 pieces of legislation before us, and the first piece is to consider resolution number 1510, authorizing and directing the mayor of the city of Newark to submit an application to the Ohio Department of Public Safety for an award of fiscal year 2015-2016 funding under the Ohio EMS Training and Equipment Grant Program. And I see Ms. Gilks is at the podium.
This is our annual application for our supply grant from the state of Ohio. Runs along the state fiscal year, which is July 1st through June 30th.
Motion. Motion, Mr. Marmee.
Second.
Second, Mr. Bubb. Any questions from the committee? Any questions from the audience? All those in favor of moving this on to full council signify by saying aye. 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 Opposed, same sign. Motion carries 5-0. And our second piece of legislation is resolution number 1511, appropriating monies for the municipal corporation. And this is for the ODNR fund. I see Ms. Gilks is still at the podium.
The city was fortunate to get a grant from the Department of Natural Resources, and we need to appropriate the funds. We'll be reimbursed 75% of the total grant. The monies will be used to purchase some ADA accessible playground equipment for Hollander Pool.
Motion. Motion, Mr. Marmee.
Second.
Mr. Bubb. Questions from the committee? This is for the pool again, you said? Hollander Pool.
New toys for the pool.
New toys. Okay, that's always good. All right. Any questions from the audience? All those in favor move this on to full council signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries 5-0. Thank you very much, Mr. Gilks. Our third piece of legislation is resolution number 1512, appropriating money for the municipal corporation. And I see Director Rhodes is at the podium.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This $15,880 represents an insurance check that we've received. We're asking that it be reappropriated. We had a tractor that was stolen from the cemetery.
Motion.
Motion, Mr. Bubb. Second, Mrs. Floyd. Any questions from the committee? Questions from the audience? All those in favor move this on to full council signify by saying aye. 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 Opposed, same sign. Motion carries 5-0. Thank you, Director Rhodes.
Thank you.
Our last piece of legislation for this meeting is resolution number 1513, authorizing and directing the mayor of the city of Newark to apply for financial support from the state of Ohio 2015 Nature Works Grant. And Ms. Gilks is at the podium.
This is a new application, and it will be due May 1st. And right now, we're looking at the bike path and the cemetery as the areas that we may concentrate on for an application. And the Citizens Advisory Committee will be discussing both ideas in the upcoming months.
Motion. Motion, Mrs. Floyd. Second, Mr. Cost. Any questions from the committee? Mr. Marmee.
Where's the 25% going to come from?
It can come from in-kind, or it can be cash or a combination. So,
do we have a plan yet?
yeah, we have a plan.
Is it going to come from capital improvements or general funds?
It's possible it'll come from capital improvements. However, with these Nature Works grants, what's nice about them is we can count in-kind labor. So anytime the staff of Cemetery and Parks works, I can, cost out their time. And so I always try and do that. We usually end up doing a combination, but right now it's not in stone, but it would be capital improvements and in-kind would be the two possible sources.
And we've already received our first donation for $5,000 that's coming towards us.
Any further questions from the committee? Questions from the audience? All those in favor, move this on to full council, signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carries 5-0. Thank you very much, Ms. Gilks and Director Rhodes. That concludes the business of the Finance Committee, and services next.
We'll bring the Service Committee meeting to order. Mr. President, Mr. Bubb, Mr. Rath, Mr. Loretta, Mr. Blake, and myself.
You're under construction in 60. That's good.
Our first item this evening is for a discussion of the proposed rezoning of 2260 River Road, proposed development of the site, items to consider in a development agreement, and other funding sources for public improvements in the area. Service Director Rhodes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Again, I'd like to extend a thank you to the committee and council for at least allowing the Redwood Development Company and myself to come in and talk with you a little bit about their proposed addition to the development they currently have ongoing on River Road. You're all aware that they're currently under construction for 66 units on River Road. That's under construction as we speak. That property was zoned properly, and they came in, they met all the conditions of the zoning, they were issued a zoning permit, and they're under construction. Since then, they've went into contract to purchase a piece of ground that butts that ground. It's 6.1 acres. It's currently zoned, I believe, agriculture. They want to make the zoning the same and add another 44 units. As you know, when you have zoning proposed changes, it comes to council, comes to Planning Commission. We have a public hearing. A month later, I generally render an opinion and send it back to council for another public hearing. In this case, at Planning Commission, I believe it was November, without checking my notes, we tabled the discussion on the rezoning because we wanted to work with the development company a little bit further. We heard an outcry from residents in terms of traffic, streets, water, sewer, things of this nature. So we've had an opportunity to meet with the Redwood Development Company. They have some ideas, and instead of me taking these ideas in and coming up with an opinion and sending them to council, which you guys have one public meeting and then you debate it and you decide whether to be rezoned or not, I thought it would be appropriate to come in and allow them to come in and give you some ideas of what they're thinking. I'm going to take another month, render an opinion before I send it back to you guys. So it's not on Planning Commission tomorrow night, but it'll be on Planning Commission in March. And at that point, it'll come back to you guys for another public hearing. I had Sherry Elkins from my office reach out to some residents. I don't know how good a job she did of that. I've heard she had a wrong email on one of them. But anyways, I wanted to inform you guys on some of the thoughts. So after laying that groundwork, I'd like to say that we have John Laudelier from Redwood Development. He's here tonight to speak to you, give you some ideas. Please ask some questions and answers. I don't want to say that this is my opinion and the direction we're going to go, but it is an option for us to discuss. So with that, John.
Sure.
If I may, I have a couple of things. One's a map of the development, and the other one's just some backup that talks about what I'm going to talk about tonight. Is that?
Sure.
I've got extra copies too if anybody in the audience wants. Thank you. Just to give you guys some context of what we're talking about and where we stand. Yeah, absolutely. He's got it right there now. He's got a couple of each. I'll hold one to myself and get to talk about that. All right. Thank you. Yeah. First, I wanted to say thank you for providing us the opportunity to come in and talk. We went to the Planning Commission. We've been in subsequent communication with city staff. There were a number of issues that have come up. I think you can generally boil them down into three categories. One is the condition of River Road. The second one is provision of water service, and then the third is provision of sewer service. And these are issues that really relate much more to I'll call the global West Newark, the whole River Road area. When we sat down with city staff, the view was that there are some existing infrastructure needs in that area, and how can this development help to benefit those needs? As Mr. Rhodes said, we met with the Planning Commission. I believe it was in November, so I have my notes as well. And spent kind of the month of December and January meeting with staff to understand exactly what those needs were. My understanding, as you have in this letter here, you'll see I've outlined about $1.5 million in infrastructure improvement that's necessary not for our development, for the overall development of, I believe it's 800 to 900 potential homes, as well as some commercial and industrial lands that would be tributary to some of these systems. That's a water booster pump, that's some sanitary mainline work, and that's the condition of River Road, improving that to be more in line with what's currently there now, but then also what the total development potential of that area is. So when confronted with this, I mentioned something to Mr. Rhodes, and he raised his eyebrows at me. So I'm going to talk to you tonight about tax increment financing, and I want to talk a little bit about why it's different than what Newark has already seen. My understanding is that Newark has a couple of TIFs out there. I don't know if they've been successful or not. I know they've been a point of stress amongst people within the city. And what we're suggesting here is a tool that's available to the city as a result of us developing this property under what as I understand it, the tax law is defined as a commercial use. So we pay commercial taxes, and therefore the ability to put a tax increment financing district on this becomes a possibility. Now, if you remember when I first said those three needs that were out there, the River Road, water, and sanitary, those three needs are impending regardless of whether or not we build. Those are impending whether or not the rezoning on this 44 acres happens. It's the belief of the city staff that this area will develop at some point. And for this area to develop, those improvements will need to be made. So the way I look at this is a tool that the city of Newark could use to allow this development to pay for what would be ordinarily more than its fair share of those improvements. In the letter that I provided to you, there are some cash flow projections that show on the last couple pages what this development would pay. If it's not there, I have other copies of it, and I'll pass it out as I introduce. It's not on there. What do you know? I'll pass it out in a second, but this provides a stream of financing that when you add in the entirety of the 800 to 900 units, the commercial and the industrial, would allow the development potential of about $5 million in real estate tax base and about another $2 million in payroll taxes when you take into account the residents who will live in those homes and the value of those homes. And you can see the math as I go through that. This was something that I talked to Mr. Rhodes about. He said we need to start talking to some other people and see if this is something that is, I guess, an ancillary benefit to this being developed. Again, whether or not this is developed for 44 units, that remains to be seen. But regardless of whether or not the 44 units is built, if this area of Newark is going to be developed, these investments in infrastructure will be required. So this is just one means to funding those improvements for the city of Newark. I don't anticipate that any of these public works projects would be done day one. As it's been indicated to me, they aren't entirely necessary for what we're looking to do. There's water capacity, there's sewer capacity, and the roads have the capacity, but this is establishing a source of revenue that is known to the city of Newark. And before these public works projects need to be done, you will have the tax receipts to know what that stabilized revenue is. And those tax receipts, in fact, would be accumulating to help with any kind of local match or anything that would be required at that point, or to outright build them. I did ask Dick Spohr with Keating Meeting and Clecamp to come to the meeting. Dick has done a couple of TIFs with me. He's kind of call him a TIF guru from a legal perspective. So I asked Dick to attend to discuss some of the mechanics and answer any questions that you guys might have about how specifically this sort of a finance structure would be put together. So with that, I'll pass out the tax projections. And Dick, if you would be so kind, I think I'd like to turn the podium over.
Thank you very much. I'm going to talk a little bit about TIF. I don't know how much you folks know about the details of it. It's pretty boring stuff, but I'll give you the fundamentals, and also for any of the folks in the audience. TIF stands for Tax Increment Financing. And in its simplest form, when a new project comes online, anything that is taxable, that produces property tax, if the city, because you have the jurisdiction, of course, in this area, if the city creates an area, a TIF area, then any of the increase in value of that property, whether that increase comes from just the land increasing in value, or more likely any new construction, all of the increment of that property is captured in a special taxing arrangement. So what happens is, let's say you passed a TIF ordinance tonight, and it covered this property. The baseline of the property would be whatever the value was at January 1 of this year. And a TIF can last anywhere from 10 to 30 years. The type that's most common is a 30-year TIF. So what happens is any increase in value over the 2014 value over the next 30 years produces a certain amount of tax. Now that tax is the same to the developer. They don't pay any more in tax. It's the same, except instead of it being tax, it's now called service payments. Now, what I mean by that is those payments go into a special fund that's held by the City of Newark. It's called a Tax Increment Equivalent Fund. So net of the amounts you pay to the schools, and there has to be an agreement with the school district. So whatever the arrangement is with the school district, they get their portion of those funds. The balance of those funds goes into this special account. And I'm looking just briefly at the spreadsheet, and the one I'm looking at is, it's probably the easiest to look at. Right, the third page, which is the full build-out TIF analysis. If you look, that gives you the years. Again, this would be a 30-year TIF, and the first tax year effective would be 2017. And the estimated value of the new project is there, both phases. And if you run across the value, it says pilot, that's payment in lieu of tax. That is the service payment I was talking about. That is essentially the increase, gross increase in taxes resulting from this improvement. The next column is the school participation. Again, that would be at full compensation to the school district. The next column is the amount that the city would normally, that's the city's share of the increase, and the balance would be the excess or the amount. Actually, the last two columns would be the amounts the city will get from this improvement. Now, there are several important things to remember about a TIF. The money has to be used for public infrastructure improvements. Now, as the name says, that includes pretty much anything that, certainly any of the items that are required that we listed tonight. Those could be included. Those funds that are collected by the city can either be used by the city on a pay-as-you-go basis. In other words, as they accumulate, the city could do a project, or it could be used to support bonds. The city could issue bonds against these revenues. Now let me stop there for a minute, because in the early days of TIF, and I don't know the history here, but I expect you probably had this experience, this unfortunate experience I'm about to describe. In the early years of TIF, a developer would often come to a city that had one project, let's say a factory or a shopping center or something of that nature, and would ask for improvements for their development. So let's take the classic example of a shopping center that wanted a road to the shopping center with utilities and everything else, and then presented the same projections. And then the cities often would issue bonds for that, but then lo and behold, the project goes dark. For whatever reason, the factory goes away, the shopping center goes away. So then we have a bond issue out there with no revenues, because these revenues are taxes, and people in default don't pay property taxes. So often cities were faced with that, even though they had no obligation to pay the debt. And that's an important fact, because if the bonds are payable from these service payments, they're not general obligations of the city. Nevertheless, some cities went ahead and paid them anyway, because they didn't want to have some potential default on their books. Again, I don't know your experience, but in my experience of doing these all over the state, that's usually what sours TIF in most communities that have had that experience. The difference here, there's a number of differences. One is there'll be a number of people who will be paying these taxes. All of the people in the district will be paying it. Frankly, all of your renters will be paying, every person in the apartment building, a portion of their rent will be these taxes. The other difference is, and this is very unusual, normally when I'm making these presentations, I'm doing it for the developer who wants something themselves for their own project. And let me talk about that for a second, because historically, before TIF, any developer that wanted to put in something, the classic case would be a residential, single-family residential area. They would need to put in roads and sewers and everything else. What often happens, they have to include that in their debt, and then they'll dedicate the roads to the city later on, but don't expect any payment from the city. So TIF now replaces that, and most developers will come in and ask that their necessary improvements be paid by the TIF. That's not the case here, which is extremely unusual in my experience. What we're talking about here is the incremental taxes produced by this development will be available to the city for use off-site for other improvements that may be necessary or desirable by the city, but which are not necessary specifically for this development. Again, that's unusual, where the developer does not need any infrastructure themselves, but is producing revenues that would allow it for the city. Again, I don't want to get too far in the weeds there, but I did think it was a good idea to maybe go into some detail on how this works. And actually, to be a little exotic, and then I'll stop. If you look at that same page, the last two columns, it says city and excess pilot. Now, remember I mentioned these last two columns normally have to go into this special fund that can only be used for public infrastructure. You can structure it where the city will get that column where it says city. That could be paid directly to the city and not into that fund. So that could go into the city's general fund. We could structure it that way, where that would go in the general fund, and the last column would go into the public infrastructure fund. That's more of city finance analysis, but again, the normal course is to include both of those columns for the public infrastructure, but it could be structured where you would get the money in the general fund. So with that, I'll open it up to any questions you might have, or if folks in the audience have a question.
Mr. Rapp?
Thank you for explaining that to us. If I look at these columns, I see the largest number being 8.6 million coming from school participation. The third column from the right. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. And that 8.6 million is monies that's going towards development, or as you put it, public infrastructure and improvement that would have normally gone to the school system.
No. The school actually gets this money. This column, the third from the right.
So where does the school participation come in? The way I understand it, Tiff, and correct me if I'm wrong, you obviously are the expert, is that the only way that we're going excuse me, to receive additional tax funds is if the school agrees to receive fewer tax funds.
No. The school can agree to that. Some school districts do. For example, Cincinnati, where I'm from, the Cincinnati Public Schools agrees to take 25% of the increment. That is less than they would normally get. They would normally get about 34%. They've agreed to take less to promote development, to increase the tax base. The theory being without incentives, things won't get built, so the 25% of something's better than 34% of nothing. So that's a negotiable point. In these columns, we've assumed that the school would not be getting any less than normal. So the school, in the school column is the full compensation, what the school would normally get. So the city is not gaining anything at the expense of the schools.
So the school doesn't need to agree to this?
The school does need to agree to it only because the statute requires it. The schools, if you do more than 10 years, the schools have to agree. Normally the schools will agree if they get the full amount of taxes. And I'll tell you,
with this plan they are.
yes, and I'll tell you why. The schools can actually make a profit doing this. And let me tell you how that works. The state of Ohio gives money to each school district to try to equate the per pupil expenditures around the state. But before you can go to the school district or to the state, you have to have at least a basic amount of tax on your citizens. Otherwise, if you go there and say, we need money, and they look at the books and you have no property taxes, well, sure you need money. But the state is going to say, hold it, we're going to impute a certain amount of tax on your duplicate. So let's say it's $3 1,000, pick a number. We'll say, we are going to reduce your compensation, Newark schools, by $3 1,000 on everything on the tax duplicate. These properties are exempt from regular property tax. Remember I said earlier that it's no longer tax, it's called service payments. So these properties, the $10 million, will not go on the duplicate for purposes of the state calculation. So the state is not going to reduce the amount of money going to the Newark schools because of this assessed value. So not only do they get the full amount of the taxes, what they would have been, they will get the additional $3 per 1,000 from the state. So if they get a full comp from you, they're making a profit. It's a pretty sweet deal. So that, a long way of answering your question, the schools almost always agree to these things because it's profitable for them.
Mr. Chairman, I'm familiar with, we have one on our east end of town for Longaberger, at which was a commercial area in which Longaberger's company has gone through some issues themselves. So the TIF is, as you described earlier, possibly was a like we were scared about getting our money back from that. And then there's a TIF on the north end of our town, again, in a commercial area. I'm not familiar with using TIFs in residential areas. So can you speak to how often is this used for residential type things?
Well, this is where the Ohio law of taxation comes in. Even though it is residential in the sense that people reside there and cook their meals, I mean, it's because it is rental property, it's deemed to be commercial. Frankly, a lot of developers would prefer that it be taxed as residential because the residential rates are cheaper than commercial. But the Supreme Court said, no, hold the phone. Even though people live there, it is commercial. So that's the difference. Residential is certainly the normal term you would use as a English-speaking human being. But when you become a lawyer, your brain doesn't work quite as well. And so, or it works differently, shall we say, where the commercial definition comes into play. So that's the answer.
Any other questions from the other members?
Well, Mr. Chairman, my understanding is that originally the request was to do a zoning change, and now you're presenting this possibility of a TIF. So I guess I'm trying to understand what would happen if we would just want to do the zoning change, or if we don't want to do the zoning change, and then you have another avenue with this TIF situation. So is that correct? There's two requests going on here.
Actually, we hope that you combine them in your mind, and this is how they're being offered. I'm Connie Klima. First of all, I'm a zoning attorney. I've not been involved on this project particularly, but have been involved with Redwood and other locations, and been involved with Newark zoning a lot of times. But what's happened is a lot of times, as you know, when somebody wants something zoned, a lot of times people come in opposition of that because there are poor roads, and because there are improvements that are needed that won't usually come until after development and after it gets bad or worse. So in looking at the whole picture here, Redwood was saying after the Planning Commission in November, we have some real issues. Some of these neighbors have some real issues with the road itself and adding more people there, 44 more units to it. And also, utility department has some issues because there's a lot of plans that need to be put into place for future infrastructure support, and where's the money going to come from? So Redwood sits there and goes, well, we're not going to ask for any additional money. We're not going to ask for you to participate with us and give us a TIF where we'll pay it and then you pay us back. We'll go ahead and take care of our infrastructure, and you have the infrastructure to support what we're proposing to do. But we understand that the neighbors have an issue, first of all, with our rezoning, but second of all, because it's going to produce this additional wear and tear on our roads. So we thought, why not present this other type of a TIF? We're not, in a sense, borrowing from the city and asking you to pay us back then, but basically you're borrowing from us. But we'll go ahead and do our part. If we get to build these 44 units, we'll do our part, we'll do our own infrastructure, we'll pay for that. But why not, as an option to the city, use our taxing funds when we start paying you our taxes? Why don't you put this in this fund where you will accumulate these dollars and you can spend them how you wish on your infrastructure? In other words, if we don't do well, if we for some reason didn't rent, you're not out anything because you wouldn't have had it anyway. It becomes something that accumulates funding for potential use by the city in the future. We think it goes hand in hand with the zoning request because it's a partnership in a sense where by doing this, by presenting more people on your streets, let us also participate in helping you build that wealth to confront it.
I have a question, and I'm not sure. I think it's the gentleman in the center that I want to address this to. currently, the first phase of what's going on right now, there's 60...
I don't remember the exact number, 66, 69, it's 66, it's in that high 60s number. I'm sorry, I didn't have that number when I went
No,
to
that's
that.
right. And how far along are we on that phase?
Building 1, the model should be opening next week. So my understanding is, and I wanted to stop out there on my way out here, and I got crunched for time. My understanding is the COs are either in hand or close to being in hand for Building 1.
What's a CO?
I'm sorry, certificate of occupancy. So that's the certificate from the building department that we're 100% complete and that we can occupy the structure, safe for the public as opposed to construction workers. Buildings 2, 3, and 4. The last time I was in there, which was, really cold, so a couple weeks ago, there were foundations in the ground and slabs poured. So those should be coming out of the ground with wood here, but they haven't already. They should be coming out of the ground in framing here in the next week or so. So, building number 1, I think, was probably the one that was the most pain for everybody. You have the initial land development, which required us doing our water tap, things of that nature. Building 1's up close to the road, so there's a lot of activity going on up there. Now that Building 1 is at least mostly complete, if not complete, the rest of the activities that will be occurring are back within the property and away from River Road.
And it's a total of 4 buildings?
No, there's more than that. I don't know the exact
number. 2, 3, and 4. I didn't know if there were...
We've got overall a year's worth of construction in here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14 buildings back there. Yes. If you look at the map here, the road is poured all the way to the end of this building right here, and I believe it's a short piece of this road that's in as well. So until I pour more road, those are the maximum number of buildings I can put back there until it thaws.
So the phase 1 is just really getting started. Is there a I guess the word need, is there a reason to be jumping right on phase 2? I mean, as it stands, is that something you're looking to do right this minute?
Well, as we move through a community, what we like to do is we've already got leasing momentum. I'm fast forwarding 4 months from now. We open the model tomorrow or next week. We'll have leasing momentum going on. I think the answer is yes. I would like to do this phase 2 piece in the 2015 construction season in terms of the roads, so that we can build the rest of those throughout the 2015, 2016 into the following summer. Our absorption, our projections on this property, and we hope they're conservative, are that we'll absorb 6 to 8 units a month with our new leases. We hope we're conservative and that it exceeds that. But if you go at just 6 units a month, from the day we open a unit, call it February, we'll be out of units by December for delivery. So we would like to move forward on the phase 2 in the 2015 construction season, provided leasing happens as we've determined that it will. So I guess, yes, there's a need to move forward. By the time we get this zoned, do our engineering plans, go through the engineering department, file for our state permits, we could easily be in July, August, which would be a fantastic time for me to start building roads in the phase 2 piece. I think the other reason is, as Ms. Klima had alluded to, is when I look at this, I'm a city planner, so I kind of look at things in their entirety. Because I believe that the greatest benefit for the city is to look at these together and put a TIF district over the entire 110 units. I do believe that we want to have that done by the end of the 2015 construction season, so that you can use the basis for the land that was established at the beginning of this year, which is vacant land. If we do not move forward in 2015 with what we presented in front of you, you move forward in 2016, then any of the units that we have on the ground at the beginning of 2016 then will become the basis for that TIF. So there's a much smaller return on what the city of Newark could receive out of those service payments. Is that accurate?
Thank you. Any other questions?
Oh, yeah.
Go for it.
I apologize. I'm going to show my ignorance here. Because I came into this meeting assuming the whole school funding thing. And I guess I want you guys to I want to make sure that you realize that we're talking about Newark
Granville
residents
schools, yeah.
and Granville schools.
That's correct.
So they're not one and the same by any stretch of the imagination. So I guess I'm confused. Maybe it's just my ignorance or lack of experience or lack of knowledge or whatever it is, but where does the money come from in the TIF? I still don't get that. Where does the extra income come that if we didn't do a TIF, that we have?
If I can just try, and Dick can correct me at the tail end of this thing. So I'm going to just, by way of example, say this. I don't know.
That's round numbers.
Yeah, I'm going to say this property currently pays $10,000 in taxes. What we're saying is at the tail end of this thing that the property will be paying annual taxes of $306,000. So that's $290,000 in tax revenue that constructing the entirety of this project, phase 1 and phase 2, generated. Those are additional taxes. So what the TIF legislation provides for is that $290,000 then goes into I'm going to call it a pot of money. So it goes into a pot. What we proposed tonight is that the school portion, $254,000 in the first full tax year, then be paid right back to the school. Mr. School District, Granville Schools, you're entitled to $254,000. If there wasn't a TIF in place, you would get this. Here you go. Here's $254,000. Part of the discussion is the number of school kids will generate, which will be historically low. We can go through those discussions with the school district. But here's your check for $254,000. City, there's
$36,000 left.
42,000 plus 9,900. So it's around $50,000 additional, and those are funds that would be earmarked for some sort of capital improvement.
Why? That's what I'm confused about, because the $42,000 and the $9,900 is coming to us, whether there's a TIF or not.
If I might butt in, pardon me. Here's the reason. And again, looking at the column for reference on the. So the total of the last two columns, the city portion, that's what the city would have gotten, the 9,000.
Okay.
The 42,000 is all the other taxing districts. Now, when you get your tax bill, and this I think answers your question, when you get your tax bill, there's a whole array of taxes, how it's broken down.
Talk about my property tax bill.
Whatever's on your property tax bill. So it's probably got...
It goes to 15 or 20 different places, I understand.
The only entity that is protected by statute is the school district. So the school district you must have an agreement with the school district. The statute does not say you must have an agreement with the library district or the MRDD. Again, I'm not sure what your array of taxes is. So those other taxes are the ones that are captured. So those go into the TIF fund. So I think that accounts, in this example, for the 42,000. The 9,000 is already the city's portion. 42 is all the other taxing districts except for the schools.
And we don't need anybody's permission to take that $42,000.
No. No, the General Assembly, in its wisdom, and we'll give them that, decided that this is an important tool for cities, and that they should have the authority to do it under their home rule powers, except for the schools. And it doesn't say the schools have to get their full amount. It just says there has to be an agreement with the school district. And many school districts will agree to less than the full amount for a project if the city wants it, if there's policy reasons for wanting to do that. Some do, some don't.
I don't see people doing that.
Normally they don't, to be honest. But under the statute, you do not need the permission of any other taxing district unless, let me add this, unless you're doing what's called a TIF district. Now this is what's called a project TIF, where you've got a discrete project at the city council, acreage, boom. You can also do what's called a TIF district, and Cincinnati has done a lot of those, and a lot of cities do, where you do a 300-acre TIF district. No project. A lot of townships did this on farmland. And then when stuff gets built in the farmland, actually during the boom of the single-family housing, which we all remember, it's a little bit dim in the past, but in the 2000s, there were developments popping up on all these cornfields all over the place. And those TIF districts captured all of that at the expense of all the other taxing districts. So if you want to do a TIF district, then you have to pay the county the social service levies. So the statute does talk about that if you do a big district. If you do a project TIF, no, because they didn't change the law there because, again, they want that as a development tool, primarily for the city. Because the city, again, nets the last two columns for public infrastructure, which it wouldn't have otherwise. But I think hopefully that answers your question, where the money comes from.
It does.
Okay. And again, if the schools, and again I doubt that they'll do it here, but in a lot of communities, the schools will take less, and of course that drops to the bottom line over here.
Yeah, but
Understood.
you keep bringing that up.
I only bring it up to illustrate that it could help, but it doesn't here.
Sir, and then just so I'm clear, is this development asking for specific infrastructure improvements right off the get-go?
No.
Okay.
No, we will pay for, finance our entire development. We've worked with city staff. The belief is that everything has capacity the way it currently is for this 44 units. We aren't asking, in fact, we aren't making requests at all for the expenditure. I'm coming to you as a property owner. I own a project saying, I think this would be a great tool for the city of Newark to use to help support future development in the area. I'm also an applicant on an item, so I guess I'm coming to you in those two. But I'm not asking for anything. This is, if you read through tonight when you want to fall asleep, you can read through the letter that I wrote. These are all items that city staff have identified that are outstanding needs that they would like to take care of in the next foreseeable 5, 10 plus years.
Thank you.
And as far as River Road goes, I understand that has been slated to be
repaved
first thing this spring. It's next to the list. And monies have already been set aside for that, and we've already paid for that. So I know that's supposedly a non-issue. Am I correct?
It's definitely on the list, and it's about $95,000 to resurface that section of street. I think that's a simple resurfacing. That's an 1.5 inch asphalt on what's existing there. That does not include any turn lanes, any improvements to the berms, any improvements to the ditches, or anything like that. Those additional things are the type of things that we could hope to improve in the future with additional funding, though.
I guess, and going along those lines, we have an additional 44 units that we're talking about here, but there's an additional 260 units going on just west down the line, down the road. When that development begins, would they also be contributing towards improvement of River Road in some capacity? Because the way I understand it, and I'm not an engineer, I don't even play one on TV, but from what I understand, is it's not the surface of River Road that's the problem so much as it is, I forget the terminology, but the base underneath it that's broken down from all the heavy construction equipment that went over that 15 years ago when those houses were being built. And it doesn't need a resurfacing 1.5 inches so much as it needs a new base. And I'm thinking if we put another 1.5 inches resurfacing on it, and then have construction equipment back there to build 240 or 260 homes, however many it's supposed to be, that we're going to be right back where we are today.
If I could, this is one of the reasons I had this conversation. So, one of the options we talked to city staff about was, each additional unit could pay X dollars. And, my total, I'll call it an impact fee. I know that's a little passe in community government, but I'll call it an impact fee, would be, $1,000 a unit. But I would only be paying for then my proportionate share of what might be necessary down the road. So the city would have to find a way to fund these improvements at some point or wait for these developments to come forward. That's the reason I went to this as a solution, because this is a way that this project specifically could generate revenues to, in year one we'd generate what our net quote impact fee would be just for phase one, but then each additional year throughout all 30 years, we would be continuing to pay that impact fee through the taxes that would be put into this fund. So I guess I looked at it from an overall development of all of the, I'll call it West Newark, this was a mechanism that I could propose that's unique to my project, because the single-family subdivisions aren't able to participate in that we could provide the city of Newark to help fund those in advance of their need. So you don't have to wait for the 260 units to build and for them to pay their, whatever it is, $1,000 a unit. I would be providing a revenue stream that would be putting that money into an account to the city in advance of that. That was what led me to this as a solution. Sorry, I thought you might benefit from that background of what led me to this based on that conversation.
Ask a question for the city engineer, if I can.
Yeah. I just wanted to go on a little bit what John said. Because this is different, the apartment development that he's proposing is commercial and it can be TIF'd. The other developments that are proposed on the other land are single-family residential, so it would not be able to be TIF'd like this would. What we've done in the past in the Park Trails and the Park Ridge subdivisions is we've negotiated development agreements with those developers, just similar to, like John said, a X number of dollars per unit type contribution to the city. But that happens, at the time that we plat the subdivision and that subdivision's approved. So, and it's a one-time payment. Actually, there's I don't know what the exact number is, but there's some money sitting in an account from the Park Trail subdivision and from the Park Ridge subdivision to make improvements out there, but not enough to do all of River Road. There's enough to do the little piece in front of their developments, but not for the entire roadway. So I just wanted you to know that. That's how it's been done with the single-family developments in the past.
That's a quick question, and I don't think it's on purpose, but if this development was to happen, phase one, phase two, in your opinion, are the turn lanes, is that necessary now? Is that something it's not reactionary, so you don't want it to be 5 or 10 years down the road? Is this something that would need done now? I guess considering a vast population increase and what's your kind of opinion on the street traffic flow overall if this development would happen and the amount of folks we're talking about?
Just for the apartments?
Yes.
The 44 additional units.
You mentioned something about turn lanes. Is it something you think about now if you did this TIF to pay that back, or do you wait down the road, and where do you
Right now, the 44 units doesn't generate enough traffic to require a turn lane.
Yeah, I was talking about the additional,
place.
I guess, the phase two for the additional what we're talking about here.
Right.
That's the phase 2, the 44.
Those additional,
66, I'm sorry.
the 66 is the phase 1 that's already out there.
But the
And it
initial,
didn't-
you don't believe that?
No.
Okay.
So, but I do believe there are other improvements that are needed out there. It'd be nice to be able to widen that roadway a little bit, do some berm work, improve the ditches that are out there, some of the drainage issues. And then along with that, as John made reference to, we've discussed issues with the water system out there. Roger's got some master planning that's going on that we would like to make upgrades to the water system, and also extend additional sanitary sewer out to that area. So those are all things that we would wish to do to make it improve the entire infrastructure out there. So it's not really just about the roadway.
Brian,
Yeah.
question for me. The concerns that some of the area has about this development, the 66, the 44, this development, with the amount of increased traffic and wear and tear on the roads and that sort of thing, do you think the perspective is also increased by the fact that the Cherry Valley Exchange is not done and people are using River Road more now as it is? If Cherry Valley Road was finished, do you think that would give this a different amount of resistance or a different outlook on what's taking place here, or do you think that's a factor?
We haven't done any origin and destination studies or anything out there, but I would think there's a fair amount of traffic that cuts through from the Canyon Road area over to Cherry Valley Road and uses River Road to do that. And if the interchange were up when it is upgraded, it may eliminate some of that. I don't really know.
I think it'll eliminate some of that if we could increase enforcement in that area. Because a lot of the complaints that I have are commercial trucks going up and down River Road. And there's signs out there now that say no through truck traffic. But obviously it's a lack of enforcement, not to mention a lack of enforcement in speeders as well, which is also a common complaint about River Road.
I think we've had the discussion about the through trucks on different routes in the city, and I think there might be a discussion with the law director, but I don't think that's something that we can really enforce. The speeding, though, definitely is. So.
Thank you.
All right.
I have two main concerns. One of them is what happens to the Harris Farm, which is the farm just west of that property. It's an adjoining property, and because it's an adjoining property, it's very easily rezoned to multifamily dwelling. This additional request for rezoning will have zero effect on that because it's on the east side of the property. The Harris Farm is on the west side of the property, already adjacent to multifamily dwelling. I would hate to see that property go to multifamily dwelling and have all apartments in that area. I just would hate to see that. The other one is that, John, you and I had a conversation about being a good neighbor in that area. And I'll be honest with you, I am not impressed thus far. The fact that you closed the road that is the main access to over 300 homes without notice, to me, is just not acceptable. You guys certainly should have had signs up there a week or 2 weeks in advance saying this road is going to be closed from this day to this day. It wasn't until we yelled and screamed that you actually got out there and opened it up 2 days before you had planned on it, but you had planned on having it closed for an entire week without notice. I mean, people came home from work at night, they left for work in the morning, roads open, they come home for work at night, and there's backhoes in the middle of the road, closing it. That to me is not being a good neighbor. Let your neighbors know what's going on. If it's going to be closed, close it. And if it is going to be closed, you shouldn't have neighbors coming home or seeing that closed road in the middle of the day without people working on it, working diligently to get it back open as soon as possible. I got a lot of phone calls on that. And then I guess the question I have for you is, what are you going to do for Dr. Abdemesi and his lawn? What are your plans there?
So, Dr. Abdemesi, was that where we made the water tap? I'm unaware of the issue.
River Road.
Okay. River Road, I'm aware of.
And through it amazes me that the people in that area, the residents in that area, saw fit to do this, but they just drove around the barricade. And they drove right through his yard. And from what I understand, you guys, somebody has told him that he was going to be well taken care of.
I will. I didn't speak to him. I will call a management company. I mean, right now, being February, it's not a great time.
I understand you're not going to do anything now. I understand you're not going to do anything until the spring.
Yeah.
Until the thaw and grows. But at that point in time, I would hope that you would resod his yard and take care of the ruts that were put through.
Where the issues, absolutely.
And the trees that were driven over, replaced and repaired, and he's well taken care of.
Absolutely. I will call my management company tomorrow. They usually have somebody, one of the construction inspectors is out on a weekly basis. I will also drive out there tonight to look at it.
Now, I'm amazed that the residents in that area thought that was an appropriate thing to do. But had they had notice that road was going to be closed, they could have found that out before they drove up to a bulldozer in the middle of the yard. That may not have happened. Or at least not to the extent that it did.
This is no excuse. I wasn't aware of the road closure issue until actually I spoke to, I think it was Brian. He said, you got to get that thing open like tomorrow.
Well, I wasn't aware of the road closing issue either until the 20 or 30 phone calls I got that asked me why the heck was our road closed and why weren't we told that it was going to close.
Sure. And again, my apologies. I think as soon as I was brought to my attention, certainly it was open the next day, I believe, but I wasn't down here and I wasn't watching it happen. So my apologies to you and to everybody in the area. I think
But you're the one that promised me that you would be a good neighbor.
Well, I believe what I said was that we discussed construction traffic on River Road. Mm-hmm. My understanding is the construction traffic to our site isn't using that portion of River Road. At least I haven't heard that it is. If I am, I'll have another conversation with them. I'll stand out there with a flag if I have to.
I don't see any residents here to tell me otherwise, and I haven't heard it otherwise, so I don't.
So I hope that that's been successful. I know I've had several conversations with the owner of the landscaping business here. He and I have been working on, there's been some parking in his lot and things of that nature. I believe we've got all that squared away. I mean, I don't own his property yet, so there shouldn't be parking there. Mm-hmm. So my understanding is that when issues have come to my attention, I've made sure they've been taken care of. Again, the road closure, my apologies, it's no excuse. I didn't know it was going to be closed when it was closed. My understanding is that they coordinated with all the appropriate agencies, but that's not the nicest thing to do. So that there should have been signs up warning people, and my sincerest, heartfelt apologies. This is not how we like to do things, and I think you'll find that as we get operational in this community, we like to support local community events. We sponsor things. We like to invite the community into our sites. We really do like to be good neighbors, and I do mean that from the bottom of my heart. And my sincerest apologies. Again, I don't want to make the excuse that I didn't know. That's not the right answer. I should have known, and there should have been notice, and there wasn't. So that issue has been dealt with my construction company. I hope the fact that we are no longer, the water tap's done, there's no other impacts out into that road. Hopefully that helps to mitigate that. But again, as issues come up, certainly let me know, and I'll be sure to make sure they're taken care of.
Will there be any more impacts to that road if Phase 2 happens?
The water system will be serviced internally. We have a private water system in there, so the tap and the vault that was out there was the impact to the road. And the sewer system is in discussion with the city right now, but it can be serviced through our existing private sewer system that we have on site as well, so there shouldn't be. I can't guarantee that, and if there is, certainly your comments are well made. I'll make sure that everybody's aware of what's going on, but I don't foresee any impacts out there. In fact, I don't even believe there's another entrance out to River Road. No, there is one other entrance. So, there'll be some work in the right of way at that point, but no closures for water mains or anything like that. I believe that when they poured that approach, that was a much more manageable situation because they had flaggers out and it was done during business hours. And that's what I would anticipate that second entrance to be done as well. All I can say is I'm sorry, and I'll try better next time.
Do we have any questions from any other members of council? Mr. Murray?
Yeah, I guess first comment is those folks that drove around into the yard weren't good neighbors either. They shouldn't have done that. I don't know if it's necessarily this gentleman's fault. Not only that, I believe you probably gave proper notification to the folks in the city as far as and got permission to close the road. So shame on us too. So I guess what I want, just to make sure that I'm clear on, is that Phase 1 has already taken place. Phase 2 is what they're asking for as far as rezoning. And it's 44 additional units. Property owner rights is something that we always look at as far as when we're doing a zoning change. We have to look at that. There has to be justification as to why we would not zone it when there is contiguous land that is zoned just the same as what they're asking for. I do understand that there is a need for additional infrastructure improvements and things in that area. There's needs for that all over the city, I guess. So, the zoning issue is one issue. The TIF issue is a whole completely different one. To put it together into a package I don't think that's something that we should necessarily do as a council. I believe that there's still the need for some additional funds from the developer in order to improve that area, just like the residential units that are out there. What this gentleman is asking as far as the TIF is, do you want to try to fund additional road improvements for that area at the expense of MRDD, the library, and other entities that receive taxes? That's your question that you have to answer as far as the TIF. Is it something that could benefit the city? Yeah, it could. In this situation, we can't do it with residential. The other thing is, if you look at the studies that we've conducted in the past, included in Destiny 2020, no matter what, residential housing increases the cost of us doing business in the city of Newark. It costs us more for residential housing than what we gain in revenue. So we have to look at that. So do you want to earmark that money? You're going to gain some from the other tax entities that would normally collect it, such as the library and MRDD, so on and so forth, that we kind of mentioned there. However, we're earmarking it for that area, so we can't use it for other areas in the city if we increase our tax revenue. So that's what you're asking yourself as far as the TIF. Do you want to put it into that area for infrastructure changes at the expense of other tax entities, which is a benefit to the city of Newark? We would get more tax money, okay? But it's that somebody else not getting tax money. It's not any additional tax money like they indicated. There's no additional taxes that are coming to the city because of that TIF. All it is just moving it from one entity to another. We would have the windfall in that situation. But we would, the only thing that we limit ourselves to is it no longer becomes the administration's ability to manage that money citywide. It has to be managed for that area. So now Brian Moorhead has another pot that he can utilize for that area, just like he currently has out there for the River Road. He has some funds in there, but he doesn't have enough to pay for the whole thing, but it'll just help to improve that area, and it can stay in that area. That's what this TIF will do, and that's why I think it does need to be thought of as separate. Think of the zoning issue, and I'll be honest with you, I'll tell you that I'm in support of the zoning change. The TIF, I'm a little bit up in the air yet. I don't know whether or not we want to do that, because we are kind of limiting those funds for that area, but we would get additional revenue in our coffers. Overall, we're not increasing the revenue at all, but we would get more in ours. And that's what we want to decide on, whether or not we want to do that. And, if we're trying to do what's best for the city of Newark, we look at, are we looking at just the city, or are we looking at all entities within the city? Like I said, the library and all those other entities that are receiving that tax revenue, because they're not going to get that for 30 years from those residents. So, is that kind of a correct analogy? Am I thinking right here? Okay, so that's kind of the way I'm thinking about it. So I'd hate for us to lump it together, and I won't want it lumped together as an all or nothing package, because I might be different ways on both the different ones. I might be in support of one but not in support of the other. Just depends. That's still not. We've had bad experience with TIFs. That's what. A couple of our TIFs just haven't come out about the way that we expected or anticipated. So
Right.
that's the hesitancy.
Well,
Okay. Plus these other entities are continuously asking for more money, and so we're taking money away from them too.
Yeah.
So, okay. All right. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mormon. Any other members of council, questions or comments? Any other questions out of members of the audience? Mr. Rhodes?
Thank you, Mr. Goss. I just would again like to thank council for allowing Redwood Development the opportunity to come in and make a presentation on maybe one avenue that they've thought of to help resolve some of the issues that are out there. We wouldn't have this opportunity if they had not went into contract to buy the additional land. The next 44 units, if that was not under consideration, we wouldn't be here talking tonight. What my hope to do is to talk with each and every one of you kind of individually over the next month, take another month and work with Redwood Development, and then we will hopefully come out of Planning Commission with an opinion in the March meeting, hopefully. And then it comes back to council for another public hearing so the residents can come back and give their input. But ultimately, the 10 members of council will make the decision on the rezoning or not. I heard what Mr. Marmor said, and I've heard some of the questions tonight. And that's the reason we wanted to have this additional dialogue, this additional public input, because it's not an easy solution either way, and there are needs in the area, and there are needs that need to be thought about.
We appreciate the opportunity to have this discussion, and for these folks coming in and giving us a chance to hear the ideas and at least be able to take them into consideration. Thank you.
And I'd like to thank them for coming in tonight also.
Thank you very much for your time.
The next issue we have is consider resolution number 15-14, authorizing and directing the Director of Public Service to advertise for bids and enter into contract subject to the appropriation of funds for various construction projects. Mr. Moorhead, I have a feeling it's you.
That's me. Good, how are you?
It's going to take a while to... I didn't bring the crank down to put on that computer, that old computer. So you got a piece of legislation in front of you. This is kind of a standard that we do every year when we request to.
Say that, sir, or reject.
When we request to go to bids for annual projects. So. First project is our annual street maintenance projects. That's our resurfacing project that we use capital improvements funds and license plate permissive tax funds. We're in the process of trying to accumulate that right now, and I am hoping within the next month to month and a half to have that list available and out for bids. So I'll bring that to you when I have that. The second project is the concrete maintenance. That is the curb ramps that go along with the streets proposed for resurfacing. We have approximately $50,000 budgeted through the Community Development Department, the CDBG funds that we hope to use on that project. Third project is the 30th, North 30th and West Church Street storm sewer and intersection project. Jeremy sent me an email earlier asking for a map and a little bit of discussion, a little bit more discussion of that project, and the map was up there for quite some time and timed itself out. You got to go down to the light show in the right corner down there.
Burn out some bulbs.
It's funny, it's still, part of it's still up there, the negative. That's what it looks like at night. It may need to be reset. I don't know. Well, I'll skip down to the next project. We'll come back to West Church and 30th when we can talk about it in a second here. The next project is the West Main Street Rehabilitation Project. That is a project that we are going to be fortunate to receive Ohio Public Works State Capital Improvement funding on. We're going to receive $400,000 of grant and $250,000 of loan money on that. We'll match that with our license plate, permissive tax, and capital improvement funds. And that is a project to reconstruct the curb lanes and the curb and gutter on West Main Street from 21st Street out to 34th Street. As you can all witness, the curb lanes out there are in terrible shape. Those lanes will be reconstructed, and then the entire section of West Main Street will be resurfaced through there. One of the other projects is our annual small drainage projects. Those are projects that will use our stormwater utility funding. We have a project that's ready to go right now. It was actually a carryover from last year. The 4 different areas that we are planning to make improvements are Sharon Valley Road at between Sharon Valley and Mao Street, just west of Hamilton. There's a drainage problem across Sharon Valley Road at the curve there at Hamilton. We think we can take care of that. Another drainage problem up on Audrey Drive East, about halfway up Audrey Drive. Some residents up there receiving some flooding from the land across the street. The third project is on North 10th Street. It's between West Shields and Selby. There's a small drainage problem out there that requires some grading and some additional pipe and another inlet there. And then the fourth one is over at Oakwood Avenue. It's between Garfield and McKinley Avenue. And at an alley there's a drainage problem there that we can tie into the sewer out there and get that problem taken care of. The small drainage project is about $110,000. Going backwards on the West Main Street rehab project, that's about $1.1 million. West Church and 30th Street, just a little background on that. Back in 2012 and 13, we started a study. As you know, most of the ODOT projects that we do take 3 or 4 years to get through, and we had already identified the 30th Street and West Church Street intersection for improvements with ODOT money. And as we progressed through the design of that project, we saw that the storm sewers were inadequate out there, and so we started another project to start looking at storm sewer improvements. The storm sewer improvements needed in that area ended up kind of blossoming into a larger stormwater study, and the screen that we'll show you here in a second is the result of that study. And basically, the idea of this project is to move forward, get the deep storm sewer in this construction season in order for the intersection project that does the widening of the pavement and the new traffic signals and turn lanes and so forth would be done next in 2016 construction season via an ODOT contract. There we go. I just went to full page there, yeah. There you go. So this is the what we call the Buckeye Corridor Stormwater Study. We actually started out looking at the area down around Steele and South 27th Street, and it sort of ballooned from there. Basically, that whole swath, the central portion of town, up to Church Street, has several stormwater issues. And as they looked through the study area, they identified basically everything south of Main Street has. I got my fancy pointer here. So Main Street right here. South of Main Street basically drains down to this area here. The ultimate drainage is into a very large, I think it's an 84-inch storm sewer that we have that goes over to the South Fork of Licking River. And the northern area up here, this is West Church Street up here, 30th Street's right here. The northern area that we're concentrating on with this project is to install a new main sewer down near the West Church Street Bridge, dump into Raccoon Creek here, and extend it up to the 30th Street area, actually to the 30th and possibly 29th Street, and then southward down to Woodlawn Avenue, and that will be the basis of tying in the rest of this area into storm sewer improvements. So the first part of this project that we're looking at right here is that we're going out to bid with is that project right at the intersection there. It's about $1.8 million for the storm sewer portion of the project. The intersection portion of the project coming the following year is about $650,000. Jeremy, I don't know if you have any other questions or want more description. The project, the study documents are probably 6 inches tall, and probably would be good to have another meeting or a side meeting to discuss it in a whole lot of detail, but I can give you the rough outline.
Well, Mr. Chairman, I just want to first thank you for bringing this up, because since I've been on council, I've had residents around Idlewild and Wells Avenue and Miller that have they're flooding. So, so just wanting to know. So, could you speak to a little bit about? I understand that this project for 2015, another project for 2016. So the phases, which are in the green, yellow, and the red and the blue. So, are we looking at what would be sort of the projected timeline for those different phases then? Are we looking at 10 years down the road? I mean, that's what I would just like to get a little information I could send back to constituents is what I was looking for.
I think when we look at the cost figures, the overall cost of all this was about $20 million. So we're taking a $1.8 million bite out of it with that first piece up there, and the real driver of that is the intersection project with the ODOT money. We want to take advantage of the ODOT money we've got on that. So I think this is probably a 15 or maybe even 20-year project when it's all said and done. The area down there, Idlewild, Wells, Miller. That is going to depend on some upgrades to the main sewer lines that go down across like at DeCrow Avenue there, and what's that cross street there?
Riley.
Yes, Riley, exactly. I was going to say Buckeye. Buckeye's on the other side, but the main sewer goes down Riley, and so the way you get this neighborhood into this large storm sewer, you have to make some upgrades to the existing pipe that's out there to be able to drain that large of an area into the very large storm sewer.
So the red areas, the phases in the red, we're looking at 20 years down, but you would see the green ones. I mean, is that pretty accurate as to what you're going to? I mean, the green ones are going to be the priority ones, which probably 5-6 years or so.
Yes, and really it's It's all driven by the funding. We generate, 2.6 million dollars a year with the stormwater utility right now. We've got pretty much the percentages worked out of what we should borrow, and so it's going to be a matter of when projects fall out, can we borrow more to replace those? And we can only build what we can fund. So,
Brian, and I apologize, I don't know the name of the road.
Okay.
But there's a road coming off of, a dead-end road coming off of 30th Street.
Okay. To the west?
Probably, it does go to the west. It's probably 2 or 3 blocks south of Church.
Okay, yeah.
Where there is a...
Woodlawn and Lawnview here.
It might be Longview. And there's a huge sewer drain there that is collapsed and goes nowhere.
Mm-hmm.
And that corner floods really, really bad.
On 30th Street?
Yes.
Yes.
Well, that whole intersection.
Yep.
Yeah.
Both of those will be taken care of with this project.
That's what the first,
yes.
The 2015.
Yes.
Okay, that was my question as well.
Yes.
Great, thank you.
Mr. Moorhead, when you make reference to the intersection improvements of Church Street and North 30th, can you give us just a general what's going to take place there?
The intersection, city already owns the property on the southwest corner of the intersection. There was a house there several years ago. We purchased that, tore the house down. Mm-hmm. We're in the process of acquiring the house on the southeast corner of the intersection right now. So the intersection of 30th Street, as you're coming north to Church Street, will be widened out. Better radiuses to Church Street, and there'll also be additional turn lane in there to allow better turning movements east and west on Church Street. That entire section there of 30th Street will be curb and gutter with storm sewer when it's all said and done, and then the sidewalks will also be replaced there.
Thank you.
We're putting the sidewalks in?
We are.
That was a question in the statement. Are we putting the sidewalks in?
Yes.
Okay.
We are acquiring property on 30th Street and some property on West Church Street also, widening the pavement and then reconstructing. There are portions of sidewalk there, somewhat on the east side, not so much on the west side, but when we widen that out, we'll replace that sidewalk on the east side.
Mr. Chair, just a follow-up question. Brian or even Mr. Loomis, when we have stormwater drains, now are they all typically so far in depth that they are expected to take off so much stormwater? I mean, because I know there are stormwater drains in this particular neighborhood that I'm concerned about tonight. Mm-hmm. However, they seem to fill up very quickly. So I'm just curious, is there depths that could be taken care of to make them deeper to take more capacity, or
well, there's some,
or the frequency of them being cleaned, or what would be?
There's some dry wells out there, what we call dry wells or soakaways, which is basically a hole in the ground,
right,
filled with gravel with a grating on top of it.
Yeah.
And basically you're using the void between the gravel to store the storm water that gets into it, and eventually it leaches out into the ground. So we've got several of those out there. The southern portion, like down Wyant, Harris, some of that portion there actually in some of the alleys have drains that go down and actually drain into what is actually the City of Heath system, down off of I can't think of the name of that street back, but the south of Harris. So there are some small pipes that do drain into that, but generally the rest of that neighborhood does not have adequate sewers to carry the water away.
So even making them deeper or increasing the frequency at which they're cleaned.
There's no outlet as the problem.
Okay. All right. And then what about the park, the Wells Avenue Park? Does that seem to get flooded?
I don't think there's any. I don't think there's any drainage right around there at all.
Okay.
Rath?
It's no easy solution.
No.
Just an overall question about the storm sewer plan. Are you moving west? I guess I hear you say that this is maybe a 15 or a 20-year plan, and I'm thinking about my neighborhood, Cherry Valley Road, the west end of Newark area. Cherry Valley Road's in a pretty good need, and one of those dry wells happens to be in my front yard. Not that I'm looking out for myself, but when are we going to get to that?
I can't say that we've got a date for you.
Can you give me a guess? I mean, is it after this 20-year project? So
I won't be here.
20 years?
We're going to miss you.
We don't have the projects stacked up because, quite frankly, most of the projects that we've done in the past have been. There's been another project involved with it. Very few. I think the Garfield McKinley maybe is the only project, the standalone project that didn't have other projects involved with it. So.
Well, I'll be honest with you. I'm not so concerned about my yard because, quite honestly, the drywall has helped immensely.
Seems to be working pretty well.
But I am concerned about Cherry Valley Road, especially in the area of Hooligans and the Market Basket and Nips and in that area.
Right. And we see that as a problem out there too. And we've actually looked at some other fixes out there. Again, it's going to be more expensive than what we thought. We thought some simple grading would take care of that out there, but looks like it's going to take more work than that. So
we should dry wells.
The problem with the dry wells they're limited in their capacity, and then they become a maintenance problem, especially along a busy roadway with a lot of silt and other things that clog them up. They're limited in their ability to work. So
I shouldn't be putting my grass cuttings in mine.
No. So I guess I don't have a good answer for you. When are we going to get there? If we could deliver more projects, we would. But with our current funding, we're pretty much at the limit right now.
Mr. Chairman. I'm sorry.
So you may have a temporary fix for the Cherry Valley Road area.
Yes.
Possibly in your lifetime.
In my lifetime, yeah, possibly. Yeah. We realize, and
I'm not trying to hold you to a date.
Yeah. Yeah, sure you do.
What if it's today? But I know it's not possible.
Part of the problem out there is, again, there's not a good outlet, and basically, to drain that, you would have to go into that neighborhood north of there and redo a lot of that storm sewer that's up in the northern, in that Ramona, Barbara neighborhood north of there. And it would be a very expensive project to do it ultimately. But it's a project that, the bad drainage affects, it's a circular thing. It affects the roads, eats away the edge of the roads, and so we don't get the life out of the pavement that we'd like to get, and on and on and on. So, I guess my hope is that at some point we'll be able to do another, I don't anticipate the traffic on Cherry Valley Road's ever going to lessen any. So I would hope to be able to do a project that I could accumulate 4 or 5 different types of funding to be able to do the stormwater component too with it. So,
Mr. Bove, you had a question?
I would offer a motion to pass this on to full council.
Second.
Motion by Mr. Bove, second by Mr. Rath.
I thought that we had to vote. I thought we were just talking.
Any other questions out of the audience? Anybody else's yard that they want to discuss? Fair is fair.
I'm
You know what I'm saying?
constituent, all right?
Sure, that's fair, fair. All in favor of moving this on to full council? Aye. All opposed, same sign. Thank you.
Thank you.
That we are adjourned.